I don't know where else to go, my daughter-in-law whispered from my front porch 7 years after she helped erase me from my own family. The woman who once looked me in the eye and said I was no longer welcome in my son's life was now standing in the rain with a single suitcase and nowhere to turn. I stared at her through the glass storm door and felt nothing that she probably expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even surprise. Just a quiet certainty that life has a way of bringing people back to the places they spent years trying to escape. I'm Dorothy Walker. I'm 71 years old. And the woman standing outside my house that evening was Nicole Turner, my former daughter-in-law. Years ago, she had everything. A beautiful home, a successful husband, a bright future, and complete control over my son's life. Back then, she never imagined she would one day be standing on my doorstep asking for help. But that is exactly where she was. The rain tapped softly against the porch roof while she waited. Her expensive confidence was gone. Her carefully polished image had disappeared. Even from inside, I could see the exhaustion in her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence carried the weight of years. 7 years of missed birthdays. 7 years of empty holidays. 7 years of pretending that losing my family didn't break my heart. Nicole lowered her eyes. "Please," she said quietly, "just let me explain. I should tell you that there was a time when I would have opened that door immediately. There was a time when I would have invited her inside, made coffee, listened patiently, and tried to fix whatever problem she was facing. That woman no longer existed. Life had changed me. Pain had changed me. The day she and my son pushed me out of their lives had taught me something important. Sometimes the people you love the most can become strangers without warning. Sometimes they can look directly at your pain and decide it doesn't matter." I stood there with my hand resting on the doorknob while memories rushed back faster than the rain outside. The last family dinner. The humiliating silence. My son looking away when I needed him most. Nicole smiling as though she had finally won something. She thought she had. For a long time I thought so too. But life kept moving. And while they were busy building a future without me, I was learning how to survive without them. Nicole shifted nervously on the porch and glanced toward the darkening street behind her. She looked frightened. Truly frightened. It was the first time I had ever seen her that way. I finally unlocked the door. Not because I had forgiven her. Not because I felt sorry for her. But because I wanted to hear how the woman who once destroyed my place in the family had ended up with nowhere left to go. Nicole stepped inside slowly, carrying the kind of hesitation that only comes after years of consequences. I closed the door behind her and led her into the kitchen. The same kitchen where I now spent peaceful mornings drinking coffee while watching the sunrise over my backyard. It had taken me a long time to find peace. There was a period when I thought I never would. Nicole sat at the table and wrapped both hands around the mug of tea I placed in front of her. She looked around the room as if she had entered a stranger's home. In many ways, she had. The Dorothy Walker she remembered no longer existed. 7 years earlier, my life had revolved around family. Every holiday meal, every birthday cake, every school recital for my granddaughter Emma had been carefully marked on my calendar. I was the person who remembered everyone's favorite pie, everyone's allergies, everyone's special moments. Then little by little, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. A holiday invitation arriving at the last minute. A family dinner moved to another day without anyone mentioning it. A weekend visit canceled because they were suddenly busy. Each excuse sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern I could not ignore. The hardest part was not Nicole's behavior. It was watching my son Ryan slowly become someone I barely recognized. Before his marriage, he called every Sunday afternoon without fail. He stopped by after work. He asked for advice. After Nicole entered his life, those calls became shorter. Then they became occasional. Eventually, they disappeared altogether. I remember standing in my living room one Christmas Eve staring at a silent phone. Snow was falling outside, covering the street in white. I had baked Ryan's favorite apple pie and set aside gifts for him and Emma. Hours passed. No call came. The next morning, I learned through social media that they had spent Christmas at a ski resort in Colorado. No one had mentioned the trip. No one had thought to tell me. Nicole had always been skilled at making exclusion appear accidental. She never raised her voice. She never openly insulted me. Instead, she operated in small omissions and quiet decisions. Somehow, every family gathering became smaller whenever I was involved. Every schedule changed without notice. Every opportunity to see Emma became more complicated. Looking back now, I realized she was not pushing me out all at once. She was doing it inch by inch. Nicole stared into her tea. Her eyes never left the steam rising from the cup. I wondered if she was remembering those years too. Perhaps she finally understood something that had taken me a long time to learn. A family rarely breaks apart in a single day. Most of the time, it happens slowly enough that you keep hoping things will get better until one day you realize you are standing outside looking in. The first time I truly understood how far things had gone was at Emma's 10th birthday party. I had spent 2 weeks searching for the perfect gift, a small telescope, because she had recently become fascinated with stars and planets. I remember arriving at their house carrying the carefully wrapped box and feeling excited to see her face light up. When Nicole opened the door, her smile appeared polite but strained. She stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind her. At first I thought she was greeting me privately. Instead, she folded her arms and said there had been a misunderstanding. The party was family only. I stood there confused because I was family. At least I thought I was. Nicole avoided my eyes and explained that space was limited and several friends had already arrived. I could hear laughter from inside. I could hear Emma's voice. I could smell barbecue drifting from the backyard. Everything about the scene told me a celebration was underway. Everything except my place in it. I asked if Emma knew I had come. Nicole hesitated before saying it would only upset her if plans changed at the last minute. The explanation made no sense, but I was too stunned to argue. I handed over the gift and walked back to my car. I sat behind the steering wheel for nearly 20 minutes before driving home. The telescope remained in my trunk because somehow Nicole had forgotten to take it. A week later, I saw photographs online. There were dozens of guests, neighbors, co-workers, parents from Emma's school, even relatives from Nicole's side of the family whom I had never met. Looking at those pictures felt like staring through a window into a life that used to belong to me. The worst part was not being excluded. The worst part was realizing Ryan had allowed it. He appeared in every photograph smiling beside his wife. Not once did he seem to notice who was missing. After that, similar moments became common. School events happened without my knowledge. Family vacations appeared on social media after they had already begun. Every time I questioned Ryan, he sounded uncomfortable. There was always an explanation. There was always a misunderstanding. There was always a reason. Over time, I stopped asking because the answers hurt more than the silence. Across the table, Nicole finally spoke. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "I told myself I was protecting my family," she said quietly. "I kept telling myself that." I studied her face carefully. Years ago, she would have defended every decision. Tonight, there was no confidence left. Only regret. The kitchen clock ticked softly between us. Outside, the rain continued falling against the windows. I thought about Emma, now 16 years old. I thought about the birthdays I missed, the school plays I never attended, the memories I could never get back. Some losses leave scars that never fully disappear. Nicole lowered her head and stared at her hands. For the first time since arriving, she looked like someone carrying the weight of everything she had done. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt familiar because silence had played such a large role in the destruction of my family. Not angry words, not dramatic confrontations. Silence. The silence when Ryan stopped calling. The silence when invitations stopped arriving. The silence when I realized I always learned about family events after they happened. Nicole finally lifted her eyes toward me. They looked tired, older than they should have. "Ryan did not see it at first," she said. "I kept telling him that boundaries were healthy. I kept telling him we needed space. I almost smiled at that. Space. It was such an innocent word for something that caused so much damage. In the beginning, I believed that was all they wanted. A little privacy, a little independence. Every young family deserves that. What I did not realize was that the distance would never stop growing. Each new boundary became another wall. Each wall became another reason to keep me out. I remembered one afternoon when I drove nearly 40 miles to attend Emma's elementary school music program. I had marked the date on my calendar weeks earlier. I arrived early and found a seat near the front. Parents filled the auditorium. Children waited nervously behind the curtain. I sat there smiling, proud to be a grandmother. Then my phone rang. It was Ryan. He sounded uncomfortable. He told me the event had been moved to a different day. He apologized and said someone must have forgotten to tell me. I believed him. 2 days later, Carol Foster, my closest friend, called after seeing photographs online. The performance had happened exactly when originally scheduled. Emma had stood on stage holding a small American flag and singing with her class while I sat alone in an empty auditorium across town. I never mentioned it to Ryan. I never asked for an explanation. By then, I already knew what the explanation would be. Another misunderstanding. Another mistake. Another reason that somehow always ended with me being left behind. Nicole stared at the table. I thought if Ryan focused only on our household, everything would be easier, she admitted quietly. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. Outside, the rain had begun to slow. Water slid down the kitchen window in thin streams. I folded my hands and looked at the woman sitting across from me. Years ago, she had been absolutely certain of every decision she made. She believed she was building the perfect life. Now that certainty was gone. In its place stood something much heavier. Regret. The kind that arrives years too late. I wondered how many nights she had spent replaying old choices in her mind. How many times she had wished she could go back and change a single conversation. But life rarely gives us that opportunity. Some doors close quietly. Some relationships fade slowly. And sometimes by the time we understand what we have lost, the damage has already been done. After a long silence, I stood and refilled our cups. The familiar routine gave me a moment to gather my thoughts. When I returned to the table, Nicole was staring out the window. The rain had almost stopped now, leaving the yard covered in a silver glow from the porch light. For years, I had imagined what I might say if this moment ever happened. I had pictured angry speeches, difficult questions, and demands for answers. Yet sitting across from her now, I felt strangely calm. Perhaps age teaches you that some wounds are too old to be healed by arguments. What happened? I finally asked. Nicole closed her eyes for a moment before answering. Everything fell apart. Her voice cracked slightly. Not all at once. Slowly. There was something painfully familiar about that answer. Families rarely break apart overnight. Lives rarely collapse in a single day. Most disasters begin with small choices repeated over and over until they become impossible to ignore. Nicole explained that after years of focusing on appearances, maintaining an image, and controlling every detail of her household, she began losing the very things she had worked so hard to protect. Ryan became distant. Conversations turned shorter. Disagreements lasted longer. The partnership she once believed was unshakable started developing cracks. I listened quietly. She was not asking for sympathy. She was simply telling the truth. At least I hoped she was. Emma stopped trusting me, Nicole admitted. That statement caught my attention immediately. My granddaughter had always been thoughtful, observant, and kind. Even as a child, she noticed things adults believed they were hiding. When did that happen? I asked. Nicole stared into her tea. A few years ago, she started asking questions. She wanted to know why she barely knew her grandmother. The words settled heavily between us. I thought about all the birthdays I missed, the school programs, the family photographs where my place remained empty. Somewhere along the way, Emma had noticed those absences too. Nicole swallowed hard. She found old pictures one day. Holidays, vacations, family dinners. She asked why you disappeared. I did not know how to answer. For the first time that evening, I saw genuine shame cross her face. Not embarrassment, not discomfort, shame. The kind that comes when a person finally sees themselves clearly. Outside, a light breeze moved through the trees. The storm was passing. Inside, another kind of storm was finally being spoken aloud after years of silence. Nicole looked up at me carefully. "Emma talks about you all the time now," she said. "More than she talks about me." I did not respond immediately. Instead, I folded my hands and looked at the woman who had once been so certain she could control every relationship around her. Life had taught her a lesson that no one else could. The people we push away do not always disappear. Sometimes they become the ones we miss the most. Hearing Emma's name brought back memories I had spent years carefully placing on a shelf inside my heart. Not forgotten, just stored away so they would hurt less. When she was little, she used to call me every Sunday afternoon. She would tell me about school projects, favorite books, and the stray cats she wanted to bring home. Then those conversations became shorter. Eventually they stopped altogether. At the time, I assumed she had simply grown older and busier. Now I understood there had been more to the story. Nicole sat quietly across from me, as if she already knew what I was thinking. "She started contacting me less too," she admitted. "Not because she was angry, because she stopped believing me." The words lingered in the room. Trust. It takes years to build and only moments to damage. I had learned that lesson long ago. Apparently Nicole had learned it as well. She explained that Emma became more independent as she entered her teenage years. She started asking difficult questions. Questions about family history. Questions about old photographs. Questions about holidays where one person always seemed to be missing. At first Nicole gave simple answers, then vague answers. Eventually she stopped having answers at all. "One day she asked me if you were a bad person," Nicole said softly. I could not say yes, because it was not true. I looked down at my hands. The skin was thinner than it used to be. Age has a way of leaving its signature on everything. Yet in that moment I felt something unexpected. Not victory, not satisfaction, just sadness for all the years that had been lost. Nicole continued speaking. She told me that Emma had searched through old family albums. She had read birthday cards I had sent. She had found letters that were never answered. Piece by piece, my granddaughter had assembled her own understanding of what happened. No one told her the full story. She discovered it herself. The more she learned, the more distant she became, Nicole said. Not only from me, from Ryan too. That surprised me. Ryan had always adored his daughter. Why? I asked quietly. Nicole let out a slow breath. Because she felt betrayed. She believed the adults in her life had taken something away from her. Outside, the clouds had finally begun to break apart. A faint moonlight appeared beyond the trees. The storm was ending. Nicole followed my gaze toward the window before looking back at me. Her eyes filled with a sadness that seemed deeper than exhaustion. 3 months ago, she said, Emma found your address, and she asked me a question I could not answer. She asked why someone who loved her so much had been treated like a stranger. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The question Emma had asked seemed to linger in the air between us. Why had someone who loved her been treated like a stranger? It was a simple question, but the answer carried years of history. Nicole looked down at her hands. I could not answer her, she admitted. Every explanation sounded wrong the moment I said it out loud. I understood that feeling. Some truths become impossible to defend once they are spoken plainly. I leaned back in my chair and listened as the old grandfather clock in the living room marked another minute passing. Time had always moved forward whether we were ready or not. 7 years earlier, I had spent countless nights wishing I could rewind it. Now I no longer wanted to. The life I had today was not the life I once planned, but it was mine. I had built it carefully after everything fell apart. Nicole slowly shook her head. Emma started visiting the public library after school. She looked through old community newspapers, school yearbooks, charity event photographs. She found pictures of you everywhere. Volunteering, fundraisers, holiday drives. She kept asking the same thing. If Grandma Dorothy was such a caring person, why was she never around us? I felt a small ache in my chest. Not because of the question itself, but because of how much time had been lost before anyone finally asked it. What did Ryan say? I asked. Nicole let out a tired sigh. At first he avoided the conversation. Then he said everyone had simply grown apart. Emma did not believe him. That sounded like my granddaughter. Even as a little girl, she had a way of noticing details other people overlooked. Nicole continued speaking. 3 months earlier, Emma had started reaching out to relatives she barely knew. Great-aunts, cousins, old family friends. Piece by piece, she gathered stories. None of them matched the version of events she had grown up hearing. Eventually she stopped asking questions because she had already found her answers. The day she found your address was the day everything changed, Nicole said quietly. She looked at me and asked whether I had ever apologized to you. I remained silent. Some questions deserve silence because silence reveals more than words. Nicole gave a sad smile. I told her no. Outside, the last of the rain had disappeared. Moonlight stretched across the backyard, illuminating the flower garden I had planted years ago. I remembered working there alone on summer mornings, rebuilding a life one small task at a time. While Ryan and Nicole had been busy creating a future without me, I had learned something important. Happiness built on other people's exclusion never lasts. Sooner or later, the truth arrives. Sometimes it arrives through a lost opportunity, sometimes through regret, and sometimes it arrives through the honest questions of a 16-year-old girl who simply wants to understand what happened to her family. The kitchen felt quieter after Nicole finished speaking, not because there was nothing left to say, but because some truths require time to settle. I looked toward the window again. The clouds had completely cleared now, revealing a sky filled with stars. Years ago, I would have spent a moment like this wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Tonight, I found myself wondering something else. How much of this could still be repaired? Nicole sat with her hands folded tightly together. She looked as though she had been carrying a heavy burden for a very long time. Finally, she reached into her purse and removed a folded piece of paper. She placed it carefully on the table between us. Emma wrote this, she said softly. She asked me to give it to you if I ever found the courage to come here. For several seconds, I simply stared at the letter. My granddaughter's handwriting was instantly recognizable. The sight of it brought back memories of birthday cards she used to make with colorful markers and glitter. Nicole slid the paper closer. I have not read it, she said. It belongs to you. I unfolded the letter slowly. The first line alone nearly took my breath away. Dear Grandma Dorothy, I do not know if you want to hear from me, but I have wanted to hear from you for a very long time. I continued reading in silence. Emma wrote about the questions she had carried for years. She wrote about feeling as though a chapter of her family history had been missing. She described finding old photographs and realizing how often my face appeared in moments that mattered. She wrote about wishing she had known me better. Most of all, she wrote about wanting the truth. Not blame, not excuses, just the truth. By the time I reached the end, my eyes felt warm. I carefully folded the letter and held it in my hands. She is a remarkable young woman, I said quietly. Nicole nodded. She gets that from you. The comment surprised me, not because it was flattering, but because it was the first time in years that Nicole had acknowledged any positive part of my place in the family. We sat quietly for another moment before she spoke again. Ryan knows I came here tonight. That caught my attention immediately. And, I asked. Nicole looked down. He wanted to come himself, but he said he did not think you would open the door. I considered that. Perhaps he was right. 7 years is a long time. Long enough for wounds to heal. Long enough for people to change. Long enough for regret to arrive. Nicole slowly stood from her chair and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. There was no pride left. No defensiveness. Only honesty. Dorothy, she said quietly, there is something about Ryan that you do not know, and it is the real reason everything finally fell apart. Nicole remained standing for a moment before slowly sitting back down. The seriousness in her expression immediately told me this was not something she had come to discuss lightly. I waited. After everything that had already been said that evening, I had learned that rushing the truth only delayed it. Nicole took a deep breath. Ryan spent years blaming everyone except himself, she said quietly. He blamed work. He blamed stress. He blamed me. But eventually he had to face what he had done. I said nothing. She continued. About 2 years ago, Emma confronted him. Not with anger, just questions. Honest questions. I thought about my granddaughter and could easily imagine it. She had always preferred understanding over conflict. Nicole explained that Emma sat down with her father one evening and asked him why he had allowed so much distance to grow between us. At first he repeated the same explanations he had used for years. Busy schedules, different priorities, life moving in different directions. But Emma did not accept those answers. She reminded him of birthdays that had been missed, family gatherings where I had been absent, holiday photographs where one place seemed permanently empty. Eventually Ryan stopped defending himself because even he could hear how weak the explanation sounded. That was the beginning, Nicole said. The moment he finally looked back instead of looking away. I felt a quiet sadness settle over me. Not anger, not resentment, just sadness for the years that could never be returned. Nicole looked toward the folded letter still resting beside me. A few months later, Ryan started reading old messages, cards, letters, everything you had sent over the years. Her voice softened. He realized you never stopped reaching out. Not once. I remembered those years clearly. Birthday cards mailed without replies. Holiday greetings sent without acknowledgement. Photographs of my garden. Notes wishing Emma success at school. I never knew whether any of them had been read. I only knew I could not bring myself to stop sending them. What happened after that? I asked quietly. Nicole smiled sadly. He cried. The answer surprised me more than I expected. Ryan had never been an emotional man. Even as a child, he preferred silence when something hurt. Nicole nodded as though she understood my reaction. He spent years convincing himself he was protecting his family. Then he realized he had been helping destroy it. The kitchen fell silent again. Outside, the stars seemed brighter now that the storm had passed. Nicole looked directly at me. Ryan wanted to come tonight because he wanted to apologize himself. But he was afraid. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Afraid of what? Nicole's eyes filled with emotion. Afraid you would be kind. That answer stayed with me, because deep down I understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes anger is easier to face than grace. Sometimes people can survive rejection more easily than forgiveness. Nicole slowly stood and picked up her purse. Tomorrow afternoon, she said softly. Ryan and Emma are coming here. Whether you choose to see them or not is entirely up to you.